Just as the sun was setting, Martha Kane, 58, heard the sound. Low, mournful sobbing drifting down from the trees. But it wasn't human, not even close. Out of the mist stepped a towering, weeping figure, a Bigfoot mother, cradling a limp, wounded child in her massive arms. Without a word, she laid the child at Martha's feet. "I don't know why she chose me," Martha would say later, but what happened next changed everything. Martha Kane had lived alone in the Cascades ever since her husband passed away 2 years earlier. Their log cabin had been their retirement dream, a quiet place to grow old together. But cancer had stolen him before that dream could come true. Now, at 58, Martha lived one day at a time. She chopped her own wood, tended a small garden, and rarely left the mountain. No children, no visitors, just the radio and the wind threading through the trees. The townsfolk often whispered about strange things in those forests. Shadows that seemed too tall, howls echoing in the night, giant footprints by the river. Martha dismissed it all as mountain folklore. She wasn't one for tall tales. She had never seen anything, never heard anything she couldn't explain until that night, when something real stepped out of the trees and laid a dying child at her feet. Martha slowly moved toward the small figure on the ground. The baby Bigfoot lay curled up, barely stirring, covered in thick, matted hair. Its chest rose and fell faintly, only just. A deep wound slashed across its side, swollen, red, and oozing pus. Infection had already taken hold. The Bigfoot mother stood close by, her massive frame shaking with every sob. She didn't move toward Martha. She didn't snarl or threaten. She only watched. Her eyes wide, shining with fear and something else. Trust. Martha knelt beside the child. The smell was heavy. Blood, sweat, and rot. Up close, she could see the wound had been made cleanly by something sharp. Not claws, not stone. It looked like rope. She reached out, her hand trembling. The baby didn't react. It was too far gone to fight or flee. Martha looked up. The mother took one slow step back and let out a low hum. She was allowing Martha to take the child. Martha wasted no time. She wrapped the baby in an old wool blanket, lifted it carefully, and carried it inside. Her cabin was small, one room, a wood stove, a lantern. She laid the baby on the bench and went to work. She didn't have much. Only what she'd learned from years of living off the land. Boiled water, clean rags, dried herbs, a few homemade remedies she used for cuts and bruises. The baby whimpered once, a soft, pained sound, but didn't move. Outside, through the window, Martha saw the Bigfoot mother crouched just beyond the trees. She sat still as stone, watching the cabin, arms wrapped tightly around herself, tears still streaming silently. All through the night, Martha worked. She cleaned the wound, packed it with herbs, tried to keep the baby warm. She spoke softly, not knowing if it could understand, but needing to say something. "You're not dying here," she whispered. "Not on my watch." The baby slept. The fever never broke, but its breathing steadied. When the sun rose, Martha looked outside. The mother was still there. She hadn't moved. Something had passed between them in that moment, not words, but understanding. Martha wasn't just saving a creature. She was helping a mother. Morning came, and the Bigfoot child was still alive. His breathing was shallow but steady. The fever hadn't worsened. Martha wiped his brow and checked the wound. The herbs had drawn out some of the infection. He was still weak, but he had made it through the night. She opened the door and stepped outside. The mother was gone. But something had been left on the porch, a bundle of roots, moss, and broken bark, carefully arranged as an offering. Martha understood the message. The mother couldn't speak, but she was watching, and she was grateful. That day, the baby slept most of the time. Martha kept a small fire burning, changed the bandages, and spooned a little warm broth near his mouth. He barely swallowed, but it was something. That night, the mother returned. She didn't approach the cabin, just stood at the tree line, silent and still. Her eyes never left the window. The next day, another bundle appeared, berries and leaves. This time, Martha accepted it, without question. The days passed slowly. The baby began to open his eyes. Once, when she gave him water, he looked straight at her. His eyes were dark, wide, uncertain, but he drank. By the 5th day, he could sit up with help. His breathing had improved. He even let out a soft growl of protest when she changed his bandages, an unmistakable sound that told her he was still in pain, but still fighting. Every night, the mother came. Every morning, she left something on the porch. It became a pattern, a quiet, sacred rhythm. No words, no sounds, just an agreement built on trust. Martha found herself watching the child the way she had once watched her husband when he was sick. Every movement, every breath. She wasn't just helping anymore. She was caring, feeling. It had been years since she had felt this needed. She had never had children of her own. That had always been a silent sorrow. But now there was this baby and a mother who trusted her. Something had shifted. Something inside her had awakened. On the 6th day, Martha washed the wound again. The swelling had gone down, but something about the wound troubled her. The cut was too clean to be natural. It wasn't a tear from claws or a jagged scrape from rock. It was deep, straight, with ragged edges like wire had sliced through flesh and skin. The thick fur around the wound had been ripped away in patches. She stopped. Barbed wire. Her stomach turned. She remembered the stories, the quiet talk among loggers and hunters over the years, about poachers, about so-called researchers working off the books, men setting traps in the forest to catch things they weren't supposed to find, things no one wanted to admit were real. One story came back with clarity. A man in town once said he'd found a steel cage hidden off the trail near Devil's Bluff, said it was empty, but reeked of blood and animal hair. No one had believed him. Now Martha did. This baby hadn't just fallen or been hurt by accident. He had been trapped, maybe for study, maybe for sport, and someone out there still wanted him. She looked out the window, toward the trees where the mother waited each night. They weren't just hiding, they were running. Late one afternoon, a truck rumbled up Martha's drive. No markings, just dust-coated forest green paint and government-style plates. 2 men stepped out. Both wore ranger uniforms, but something was off. No patches, no name tags, just plain green shirts and hard expressions. The taller man, his hair cropped short, walked up to her porch. The other circled the truck slowly, eyes sweeping the tree line. "Ma'am," the tall one said, "we're with a wildlife recovery unit. There have been reports of an injured bear cub in the area. Seen anything unusual?" Martha kept her face steady. "No bears here," she said. "Just deer and raccoons," Martha said. The second man stepped closer, stopping near the porch railing. He bent down, his fingers brushing against something caught in the wood, a coarse clump of dark brown hair. He didn't say a word, only handed it to the taller man with a look. Martha saw it. The tall man forced a thin smile. "If you see anything, give us a call. Could be dangerous." "I'll do that," she replied, though they both knew she wouldn't. They left without another word. When the truck disappeared down the dirt road, Martha's heart pounded hard in her chest. She went back inside and locked the door. That night, the Bigfoot mother didn't come close. She stayed deep in the shadows, pacing, restless. She knew something had changed. Danger had come too close. They were being watched. Martha didn't sleep. She knew those men would return, and next time, they wouldn't be asking questions. By morning, her mind was made up. The baby was stronger now, still limping, still sore, but alert. He could sit up and even take a few steps with help. It would have to be enough. Martha gathered what she could: dried meat, berries, a small jar of salve, and spare bandages. She packed them into an old hiking bag and wrapped the child in a thick wool blanket. She opened the door just before dawn. The mother was there, waiting in the trees. For a long moment, none of them moved. Then Martha stepped forward, guiding the baby with one hand. The child looked back at her, eyes wide and weary. He made a small, soft sound, almost a whimper, and leaned against her side one last time. She knelt down and held him gently, her arms around his thick fur, her hand resting on the back of his head. She whispered something he couldn't understand, but maybe he could still feel it. The mother stepped out of the shadows. She didn't snatch the child away. She simply stared at Martha. Not with fear, not with anger, only gratitude. No words, no sounds, just a long, heavy look. Then she took the baby's hand. Together, they turned and disappeared into the forest without a sound. Martha stood at the edge of the porch, watching the trees until they were gone. She didn't cry, but her chest felt hollow. They were gone. 3 days later, the truck returned. This time, the men didn't knock. They went straight to the cabin and began to look around. One stood by the porch while the other circled to the back. "Just making sure everything's safe," the tall one said. Martha stood in the doorway, calm, silent. They searched the property, behind the woodpile, under the porch, even inside the shed. They didn't ask permission, and she didn't offer it. She only watched. One of them stepped inside the cabin without a word. He looked at the bench, the floor, the hearth. He found nothing. The child and his mother were long gone. When they left, they didn't say goodbye. Neither did Martha. For the first time in days, the forest was still. No heavy footsteps, no distant sobs, no watching eyes in the dark. Just quiet. She slipped back into her routine splitting wood, tending the garden, listening to the wind. But a week later, something new appeared. On the stump of an old tree at the forest's edge lay a flat stone. On it, a small, neat pile of moss, 2 wild berries, and a single soft feather. Martha didn't touch it. She only looked at it for a while. A few days later, another gift. This time, a small stick bound with grass, shaped like a tiny figure. They weren't just signs. They were messages. Simple, silent, clear. The child and his mother were alive. It was just after sunrise when Martha saw them again. She had stepped outside with her morning coffee, like always. The air was cool, the forest still, but something felt different. She looked toward the tree line. They were standing there. The Bigfoot mother stood tall, still, silent. And beside her, the child no longer limping, no longer weak. He stood upright on his own, his fur clean, his eyes sharp and alert. He looked strong. Martha didn't move. Neither did they. For a long moment, the three of them simply stood there in silence. No wind, no sound, just a steady gaze, something deeper than language. Then the child took a single step forward. Not close, just far enough for her to see his face clearly. He made a sound, low, rumbling, not loud, not a growl, a thank you. It lasted only a second, but Martha felt it deep in her chest. He turned back to his mother. She gently placed her hand on his shoulder. Then, together, they slipped into the forest without a sound. Martha stood there long after they were gone. She didn't wave, she didn't cry. She only whispered, "Goodbye, my dear." And that was the last time she saw them. Martha sat on her porch as the sun came up, arms folded, eyes on the trees. "I never had children of my own," she said softly. "But for a little while, I was a mother to someone, not human, but still in need of love." She paused, then added, "People ask me if I believe in Bigfoot. I tell them no, I believe in a mother's love. And that's the truth.